Thank you for listening to this podcast from TRE, Talk Radio Europe, your voice in Spain and around the world. For more information, please visit tre.radio.
Ger Sweeney presents Live on Eire in association with emeraldconnection.net.
Live on Eire, presented by Ger Sweeney.
Poor Howard, he had a nightmare there, didn't he? Yeah, deadly stuff. There's nothing worse than when things go wrong and you're so far away. And the time of the night it is as well. Aye, indeed. Well, the time of the evening, not night time. Anyway, Howard, thank you very much indeed for most of Spain today. We look forward to catching all of it tomorrow between 6 and 7. Have yourself a good evening. And hopefully you had a nice Christmas. Well, and hopefully you had a nice Christmas as well. If you were up bright and early this morning between 8 and 10, you would have heard me. If you were listening to TRE, of course, because I was sitting in for Dave. I'm sitting in this week and next week for him. But delighted to be back in my usual spot on Wednesday evening for Live on Eire until 9 o'clock. It is the 27th of December, so this is the final Live on Eire of 2023. I suppose we could look back in the year. That's exactly what we're going to be doing in the second hour of the programme, because George Lee and Ben Sweeney, my son, will be joining me to talk to me about 2023 and maybe have a little sneaky look ahead at 2024 as well. Stephen Ferguson is the star of the show in the first hour. Stephen works with An Post, our postal service in Ireland, and there is currently an exhibition at the National Print Museum. It's an exhibition of stamps going back to the start of the state, back in 1922, when it was the Irish Free State. And it chronicles basically the various stamps that were in use down through the years, how they've changed, and indeed how they mirrored what was happening in the country and what the mood of the country was. And I'm looking forward to that conversation with Stephen, and that will be in the first hour of the programme, which is this hour. I'm going to start with something a little bit different. You know that Antonio Sierra is our Spanish-Irish cultural advisor on the programme, and Derry has a very big place and a very warm place in Antonio's heart. And Pilar Iglesias Aparicio has written a piece about her time in Derry, and somehow along the line, Antonio managed to get his hands on it. It was sent to him, and he sent it to me and said, you might be interested in this. And I thought, you know what? Here's a lady who went to Derry in Northern Ireland in 2002. She had a wonderful experience, and she's documented it this year only, December of 2023. So here it is. It's brief, and I'll bring it to you. I thought it would be nice to read it. Derry was my door to Ireland, she says. I arrived in Derry at the end of August 2002 and stayed there until the 19th of December, just the first term of the school year, as a teacher of Spanish in an only girls Catholic school near the Bogside, participating in a teachers' exchange programme between the United Kingdom and the Spanish Department of Education. 2 planes and some hours at Stansted Airport in London, took me from Malaga summer heat to the small town bathed by the River Foyle. I was surprised by the incredible loneliness of the streets on Sunday mornings, the loyalist inscriptions, and the terrible memory of a recent past still visible on the high columns that had been vigilance towers used by the British Army during the Troubles. For some weeks in September, it was summer in Derry. Derry's sky dressed in blue, and the sun shone on the green grass of the common just opposite the house where I lived, and offered me wonderful sunsets when I came home late in the evening, and I discovered it up the hill when I started to climb up Glen Road. The heritage of dominion and pain was still present almost everywhere. The first time I went to the Bogside, just one of my first days in Derry, I felt it was a sacred place and didn't dare take a photograph of the murals. Bernadette Devlin, whom I had admired so much, calling people to join the demonstrations. The soldiers breaking into the houses, the murals in memory of those who had died in the hunger strikes. Life at school was not easy. I had already been a teacher for almost 20 years in a high school in a working class neighbourhood in Malaga. I knew how difficult teenagers may be, sometimes usually reflecting on their transgressive behaviour, social unresolved injustices. But in Derry, I had to deal with some of the more difficult classes and students I had ever met. Of course, once again, like in Spain and anywhere else, those disruptive girls were only acting out the heritage of past violence. I also met good students and very young girls who found it very funny to have a real Spanish teacher. I wish all of them the best after so many years. Sometimes after leaving school in the afternoon, I went to Buncrana by bus. I then felt that going to the Republic was like getting fresh air, a break from the tension that you still felt in Derry. And some weekends I travelled to Dublin, a town I soon fell in love with. I only spent less than 4 months in Derry, but I lived the town deeply, and I still keep its beautiful colours in my memory. September's blue and green, the yellow and golden colours of the trees in autumn before Halloween, the dark, muddy streets covered in brown leaves in November, and the white, magic days of December, when everything, even spiders' webs and the shrubs' small branches that I pass on my way to school, stayed covered in ice. I also keep the memory of people's kindness, the ladies who attended the public library where I went every afternoon to read and to use the internet, the workshops about counselling and feminist literature I shared with women from Derry in the Council Women's Centre, the yoga and meditation workshops I went to, because the town where so much suffering, violence and pain had left their mark was also a place which looked for healing and recovery, and the friendship and support some teachers offered me while my stay in the school. And I keep the memory of the film festival where I saw the Magdalene sisters for the first time, without imagining then the place that they would have in my life in the future. I came to Derry for the second time last August, 21 years later. A very short visit which allowed me to come back to the Bogside and see St. Cecilia's School building far away up the hill. I could feel that some things are changing for good in my dear Derry. The old soldiers' towers, are already gone. A new bridge over the Foyle has been built, which symbolises the will to overpass divisions and to promote dialogue and understanding. The Diamond was busy with new shops and restaurants, and the town hall offered an exhibition about the plantation, trying to make past history understood and to help build up a better present. I love Ireland. I have loved it since I first met her, and I will never forget Derry was my door to this Emerald Island. A beautiful piece. It was written this year, in this month, by Pilar Iglesias Aparicio. Her memory of her experience of Derry. There's only one song that I can play after that. Here it is.
My memory, I will always see the town that I have loved so well, where our school played ball by the gas yard wall, and we laughed through the smoke and the smell. Children and then trained love. And when times got tough, there was just about enough. But they saw it through without complaining. For deep inside was a burning pride in the town I loved so well. There was music there in the dairy air, like a language that we all could understand. I remember the day that I earned my first pay, when I played in a small pickup band. There I spent my youth, and to tell you the truth, I was sad to leave it all behind me. For I learned about life, and I found a wife in the town I loved so well. But when I returned, how my eyes have burned to see how a town could be brought to its knees by the armored cars and the bombed out bars and the gas that hangs on to every breeze. Now the army's installed by that old gas yard wall, and the damned barbed wire gets higher and higher. With their tanks and their guns, oh my God, what have they done to the town I've loved so well? Now the music's gone, but they carry on, for their spirit's been bruised, never broken. They will not forget, but their hearts are set on tomorrow and peace once again. For what's done is done, and what's won is won, and what's lost is lost and gone forever. I can only pray for a bright, brand new day in the town I love so well.
Beautiful, isn't it? Written by Phil Coulter about his beloved Derry, the town I loved so well. And I thought, sure, it's the only thing I could play after reading that lovely piece written by Pilar Iglesias Aparicio. Thanks to Pilar for that one. All right, let's do a little break. Come back to me just after that and we'll talk about the state papers. Oh yes, we have to do that.
Live on Eire, presented by Ger Sweeney.
And you welcome back to the programme. The annual release of state papers always gets attention on the media between Christmas and New Year. The reason for it is because they're such wonderful historic moments that you can relive and you can get the behind the scenes story. And the other reason is that there's virtually nothing else to be talking about. You have obviously the situations that are going on, the ongoing wars across the world that people will be looking at. You will have arrests, you will have things like that would be current. But everything else seems to have kind of shut down and so on. So it's always easy, it's good fodder and easy. And so that's why we hear so much about it at this time of the year. But the annual release of state papers has become a little bit more complicated in Ireland in recent years. And that's because of Britain. All Britain's fault. Britain has moved to make confidential documents public after 20 years rather than 30 years. And so the Irish government now releases material relating to Northern Ireland and Anglo-Irish relations after 20 years. So this year, we're looking at material up to 2003. At a time when Bertie Ahern and Tony Blair were trying to keep the northern political institutions going. But files relating to other areas of government activity are still released after 30 years. So they only go up to 1993, when Albert Reynolds was Taoiseach in coalition with Dick Spring's Labour Party. The mass of material is incredible, and while the volume grows, the nature is also changing. We're starting to see in material from the early 2000s, printouts of emails rather than letters, and news stories downloaded from websites rather than newspaper cuttings. A total of 13,200 files from 5 departments were transferred to the National Archives this year. Some are from 1993, some are from 2003, some from points in between, some from even earlier. Given that range of dates and material, it can be difficult to find a common theme, but there is a kind of a pattern in the early scene documents, a pattern which illustrates the changing relationship between Ireland and Britain, based in part on the good chemistry between the leaders of the two countries, in part on the common agenda of securing peace in Northern Ireland. It was a time when British Prime Minister Tony Blair, bumping into an Irish official visiting 10 Downing Street, could breezily say, "It's a pleasure to work with you guys." It's difficult to imagine any of his predecessors saying that, or his successors, come to think of it. Even when there were disagreements, for instance, over President McAleese's attendance at a memorial service for the victims of the Omagh bombing, which the British feared would highlight the Queen's absence, or over the Irish government's insistence that early release under the Good Friday Agreement would not apply to the killers of Garda Jerry McCabe. Those disagreements were dealt with in a friendly and courteous manner. One of the older files released harks back to a much different era, a time when the Irish head of state would turn down an invitation to a royal wedding because of the perilous state of Anglo-Irish relations. That refers to the Princess of Wales, Diana, and Charles getting married. Back in 1981, wasn't it? And our Uachtaráin at the time was Patrick Hillery. Among the issues from other parts of government illuminated by the latest release is the question of decriminalisation of homosexuality, which happened 30 years ago. And of course, there are plenty of other nuggets found in the papers, including an ambassador fuming over a television programme and the mandarins in finance begrudging a few dollars spent on hamburgers and beer. All of the files are available to the public in the National Archives in Dublin when they reopen in the new year. And I made a reference this morning when I was reading that, because I was sitting in for Dave and I mentioned that story, and I said that it's a pity that we can't get all of that material online. We have to go to Dublin for it. But sure, look, isn't that the way it goes? I'm going to stay with that because you heard me mention that the mandarins in finance begrudging a few dollars spent on hamburgers and beer. Well, apparently Irish Army cadets played a big role in the November 1963 funeral of assassinated President John F. Kennedy. The president had been impressed by their drill on his visit to Ireland, and his widow phoned the Irish ambassador from the White House just hours after returning from Dallas, where her husband had been killed, to ask them to attend the funeral. But the Department of Finance later pursued the cadets for the return of dollars that they had been given for the trip. The money was used to cover casual meals and refreshments, but they had no receipts, so each cadet had to cough up around $10. Aye. And a different approach was taken, though, with the Army Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Sean McCone, who travelled with the cadets. He had no receipts for $112 spent on dinner for US Army officers and on informal entertainment, which he considered was unavoidable. But the Department of Defence agreed to cover these costs rather than have the General pay out of his own pocket. Oh, diddums. Interesting. Actually, talking of President Kennedy's funeral, there was another mention of it in the papers that were released. The funeral saw another drama, not unlike the one that we just mentioned, when the late president's distant cousin, Mary Ann Ryan, had to be rushed to Shannon Airport to catch a transatlantic flight. Miss Ryan, who had poured tea for the president during his visit to the ancestral home in County Wexford, couldn't be found in time to travel out with the cadets. But the American Embassy in Dublin managed to have a later direct flight from London to New York diverted to Shannon, and Gardaí made sure that she got to the airport on time. It's great to have the power, isn't it? Aye. Right, I'm going to do a very quick break, and after that we're going to be speaking to my very first guest on the programme this evening, and we're going to be talking about a fabulous exhibition that's underway at the National Print Museum. Stephen Ferguson from An Post will be joining me, so please don't go anywhere.
Live on Eire, presented by Ger Sweeney.
Irish stamps dating back as far as 1922 are on display in the National Print Museum. It's all part of a new exhibition which is called Miniature Masterpieces, and it celebrates a century of postage stamps in Ireland. Stephen Ferguson is the curator of the exhibition, and I'm glad to say that he joins us via Zoom. Stephen, it's lovely to talk to you, and thank you for talking to me about this fabulous exhibition which is currently underway. Fascinating, I'm sure.
Well, thanks very much, Ger. Yeah, and thank you for talking to me. It's something that An Post wanted to do for a long time. We have a big stamp collection, of course, in the GPO where I'm still based, and we still have part of our business is still sort of selling stamps to collectors, but we haven't had an opportunity really for quite a few years to put on display some of the stamps that we have. And when I contacted the Print Museum, a couple of years or so ago now, they were very keen to facilitate our putting on an exhibition in the Print Museum. And particularly if we could combine it a little bit with focusing on things like print and design, as well as stamps for collectors too. So there was a joint interest in doing something like that between An Post Museum and Archive and the Print Museum in Dublin.
When we connected originally to have a chat about this, you said to me that, stamps are not just for collecting. I suppose we take it for granted that we lick a stamp or we peel it off these days. We don't lick stamps anymore, and we put it on an envelope or a package and we send it off. And I suppose the humble stamp, for the majority of us, doesn't get the credit that it deserves, and it doesn't. We don't ever ponder, I suppose, the history and the stories that each one can tell us, and that's what this is about.
I think that's very true. There was a time when stamp collecting was always billed as the most popular hobby in the world.
Really?
And it was something that lots of children were introduced to by aunts and uncles and people like this. And they would give them a stamp album at Christmas, and they would collect a few stamps, obviously from their own country, Irish stamps here. Although we always had access to British stamps as well. They were the neighbouring country. So you'd stick them in your album, and then maybe at your lunchtimes you might meet with your friends and you'd swap a few stamps for ones that you didn't have. So it was a very popular and common hobby, and it was a very good way of learning a lot of things about history and geography and all sorts of stuff like that. But times have changed, and nowadays I think for most children, if you sort of showed them a stamp and said, "Do you collect stamps?" You'd get a look of bafflement, really, as to why on earth would you want to collect these little bits of paper. So it's a hobby that is probably declining a bit, but it's by no means gone. There's still people who collect, but there's also people who now appreciate the stamp as a little work of art, as a printed artifact, as something that will tell them a lot about culture and social history of a country as well. So that's the sort of angle that I wanted to explore a little bit in the exhibition I put on, in order to widen it its appeal beyond the traditional stamp collector.
So in this particular exhibition, Stephen, do we go back to the very beginning of the Irish Free State, just over 100 years ago?
We do, and in fact, Ger, we step back a little bit beyond that, because there's a few things that I managed to turn up which give Ireland a place of precedence in the sort of stamp collecting world in many respects, because there's a very scarce, interesting little book in the Royal Irish Academy, in the library in the Royal Irish Academy in Dublin. And it is a leather-bound, a nice red leather-bound book. And inside it has what they call a collection of stamps. And this dates from 1774. It's not, of course, postage stamps. But if you remember a bit of your history from school, you remember the American Revolution began over things like a stamp tax.
Yes. And
they didn't want to be taxed without being represented in Parliament. No taxation without representation is what they said. And this little book in the Academy's library has stamp duties all pasted in, so that it was things like newspaper, book taxes, wig taxes, wallpaper taxes. They were all there. And the postage stamp comes in a line that is descended from that sort of tax stamp.
Okay.
So in a way, it's the first stamp album in the world.
Yeah. So effectively, a stamp is a tax so that your letter gets delivered.
Exactly. It's a tax, and the stamp itself is a receipt. So that when you go to the post office and you buy a stamp from the postmaster or postmistress there, you hand in your letter, or you post your letter in the box, and you stick the stamp on it, and that is a sign that you've paid your fee, and the post office is under an obligation to deliver your letter or parcel wherever it's supposed to go. So that's the origin of the stamp. And the big date for stamp collectors is 1840, which is when the first postage stamp was produced. That was the famous penny black, which people will have heard about. The first English stamp, it was the world's first stamp with a picture of Queen Victoria on it at the time. And that was a big development in making letters easier to post. They were miles cheaper than they were before, and it was just much more convenient for people. And it coincided with a big increase in literacy, for instance, so that people were able to write and read better. The national education system, communication systems like railways, they all combined to make the post office an important institution, and stamps an important part of life.
So tell me about the first stamp then of the Irish Free State.
When Ireland became independent in 1922, the new government was very keen to show that Ireland was now its own independent country and no longer part of the United Kingdom. So the Postmaster General was a man called Walsh, who was from Cork, and he had worked for the post office in Cork as a young fella. And then his politics rather got in the way of his duty to the king at the time. Right. So he was invited to pursue his activities elsewhere. Okay. But he came back to be the boss of the new independent post office. And because he knew about stamps and knew about the post office and how it worked, he was very keen to have our own Irish stamps. So he asked permission of his former colleagues in London if they could overprint the normal British stamps that were in use throughout the country at the time, if they could overprint them in Irish. Mm-hmm. So the Irish Rialtas Sealadach na hÉireann for Provisional Government of Ireland, 1922, was overprinted with permission of the King and the Post Office in London, and they were used as our very first stamps. Now, that was a temporary measure because Walsh wanted to get things on the road as fast as he could. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, then he advertised in the national papers a public competition to come up with a new design that would reflect the new state. And that was very popular. There was about 800 or odd entries came in from artists, from printers, from ordinary people who had no particular connection with artistic or design elements. They sent in their ideas. They were all reviewed by a committee chaired by Arthur Griffith, who had, of course, once been a printer. And they selected the final designs. And the very first new Irish stamp, that wasn't a British stamp, that showed the map of Ireland. And it was produced on the 6th of December, 1922. They just got it into 1922, and the 6th of December was the anniversary of the signing of the Anglo-Irish Treaty. Mm. So it was done for political reasons to get it out on that date. And then most of the rest of the stamps then were issued 100 years ago during the course of 1923. And there were similar designs. There was on Clive Sullish, the Sword of Light. There was the arms of the provinces. They were all symbolic, and they showed with things like Celtic designs, shamrocks, this sort of stuff. They showed traditional Irish symbols. And these stamps, of course, they went throughout the world, so that it was a great way of showing to everybody that there was a big political change in Ireland.
In this particular exhibition, Stephen, do you start at the start, and does one walk or move along and see how things, shaped? And so, in other words, are you walking past, or are you observing history changing and Ireland changing as you're doing it?
Yes, I've taken a largely chronological approach to the subject. I mean, I've ordered just a little bit in terms of, say, design and print as well, so that I can do justice to that side of the subject too. But I've taken a selection of stamps from 1922 and onwards, and right up to contemporary ones, and you can see the way that the design has changed. In the early days of the state, we were quite a conservative sort of country. Mm. We were quite introverted. We were a religious people. And a lot of our early stamps concentrated on things that would not be contentious, really. I mean, you remember the country was born first from the War of Independence and then followed by a civil war. Mm-hmm. So that I think there was probably an aim of trying to unite people around things that weren't too contentious. So you had some patriots, you had your religious figures, you had big events like the Eucharistic Congress, Holy Year, things like this, so that most of the country could unite around these sort of broad subjects. In contrast to that, I'd say that there was a little bit of controversy with the very first stamp, that Map of Ireland stamp, actually, because it showed the map of Ireland without a border.
That's what I was going to ask you, yeah.
And that caused a little bit of consternation with our unionist friends up north at the time. I don't think it was done provocatively. I think it was just they said let's have a map, and they put it on. I don't think there was any intention actually to annoy anybody.
Right.
Obviously, it did cause a little bit of feedback at the time.
Talking of feedback, how often does An Post hear from the public about their like or dislike of a particular stamp? Is it a common thing? Do people get exercised about these things?
They don't too much anymore. I mean, there are still letters and emails that come in about various stamps. It was quite a common thing maybe 30 or 40 years ago that you would have found often enough. There would have been letters in the paper, in the Independent, the Irish Times, or the Press or something, where people would write in and say, "Oh, what a horrible design we have here," and then somebody would write back in and say, "No, I think it's a stunning new design reflecting a modern Ireland," or something like that. And people did take to the papers to comment on stamps. As communication styles have changed over the last generation, clearly letters are not the main predominant form of communication anymore. And that's had a knock-on effect on what people think about stamps and how much they comment on them. So that there are still occasionally controversies about various stamps which people don't like or do like for various reasons. But it's a much more in the background sort of subject now, I would think, than it was a generation ago.
In relation to when I was a Garsoon, a stamp was a stamp and that was it. And I think it was around my teenage years that the post office or An Post got a little bit jiggy with their stamps, and you got special ones for Christmas, and you got Valentine's ones with hearts on it, and St. Patrick's Day was out there as well. So the whole thing, the process and the idea of linking into society and being, I suppose, current, that's been a way of doing business for An Post with the stamps for about maybe 40 years or maybe a little bit more. Am I right?
Yes, I know you're right there. It's I think there was a change at one stage when the post office realized that there were a lot of collectors, and that from a commercial point of view, there was a revenue stream to be tapped in terms of stamps and stamp collectors. For the earlier years of the state, there weren't even stamps issued every year.
Yeah.
They were very scarce things. Over the last generation, there's been an appreciation that stamps produce revenue, and occasions like, as you say, St. Patrick's Day, Christmas, Valentine's Day, love stamps, these sort of things, they come out regularly as part of an annual program. And there's still special issues that will mark anniversaries, particular Irish anniversaries or people. That's still the core of the stamp issuing policy. But besides that, there are things that may appeal to a broader audience, so that in recent times, stamps, say, looking at sport, looking at aspects of music, Irish rock legends, U2, Phil Lynott, people like this are on stamps. And they will appeal very often to people who may want to have a little souvenir of somebody who was important to them in a broader collecting field. They may have no intention of using these stamps, but they might like to have, say, U2 stamps or something like that as part of a broader portfolio of their interests. And people will collect them for that reason. Obviously, sport's a big thing too. Irish art is quite a nice subject, and there's been over the 30 years or so, there's been a very nice selection of stamps that commemorate Irish artists in various fields and mediums over the last generation.
Is there such a thing as the most popular stamp ever? Are you familiar with that, if there is? Every year, I think we encourage people to write in and offer them a small prize to let us know what they think their most popular stamp was, so that for a year there will be a stamp selected as being one that people liked the best. But I don't think that we would be able to select something over year after year as something that's really the nicest that there's ever been. People will appreciate different things, and there are some very nicely designed stamps that will appeal to specialists. They may appreciate the artwork or the type of print that's gone into it, how a stamp is actually printed. That's important for some people too. And for instance, a lot of modern design is based on photography. Some of our older stamps would have involved an artist being commissioned to provide original artwork, which was then used at a reduced scale to produce a stamp. Okay. So that people appreciate different things and different ways of working. Can I ask you about your own job? You're the curator of this particular exhibition. Is that what you do on a regular basis? Is that what you do? Is it the historical side of things? Is it the exhibiting of stamps? Is that where you're at? Stamps are just part of the collections that we have in the post office, and for many years I was assistant secretary of An Post, and I tended just to get given things that were of historical interest because I was interested in them, and that gradually began to form a more significant part of my job. And the last few years I've been working part-time, really concentrating on the collections that we have, so that we have a big stamp collection of both Irish and world stamps. We have an archive of documentary material and files which show the history of the post office over the last couple of 100 years. And we'd also have artifacts. For instance, I have in the GPO at the moment a small exhibition of letterboxes. Oh. And letterboxes
a bit like stamps, are also historically interesting because, again, when we issued our own stamps, we also painted all the post boxes green.
Yes.
As a way of showing that we were independent. So that I have in our museum collections quite a few different styles of letterboxes, some of them with the King or Queen's symbols on them, some of them with posts and telegraph symbols on it, some without anything on them at all. And these are things that are little objects of social interest and little bits of street furniture that have a resonance beyond just collecting letters.
History wraps you up like a blanket because you're dealing with the fabulous history that you were just talking about there. But every day you walk into a building that is probably the most recognised building in Ireland, anywhere across the world, it being the GPO in Dublin.
Yes, I think that's true. And it has, well, I've been here for over 40 years now, but it has been a privilege, I think, to work in such a historic building. And lots of other people have nice buildings to work in as well, but it is a little bit extra for those of us who work in the GPO, so that I think whether you're working on the counter downstairs, one of the clerks selling the stamps, or whether you're upstairs as I am in the sort of administration side of things behind the scenes, you come in here every day and you're able to look down at all the visitors who come in, many tourists who come in, people who just like to come in and look at the GPO, either stand under its pillars outside. It's a very fine late Georgian building. The front is still original. The rest of it was rebuilt. And those who are interested in 1916 especially, and everything that happened in 1916, and who want to get the story as well, why on earth was the post office chosen as the headquarters of the 1916 Rising? And people need to stop and think a little bit and say, well, the reason is it was the center of communications, and not just for letters, but the reason that the 1916 leaders chose the post office to be the headquarters of their rising is because it has the telegraph system. And the telegraph office was on the second floor of the GPO here, just close to where I am talking to you today. And control of communications was something that was appreciated by the more go-ahead leaders of the 1916 Rising, and they wanted to control communications. And the first that anybody knew about 1916 in the GPO was when the telegraph lines suddenly went dead, and the staff who were on duty upstairs on that day, on Easter Monday, they suddenly realized that the lines had been cut. And everything, of course, developed from then on. So it's a great building to work in, and it is, as I say, it's been a privilege to work in the GPO over many years.
And of course, you and I are speaking on a radio programme, and the Irish national broadcaster, public service broadcaster, RTE, had its origins in the GPO as well. So that's
quite right. And on the opposite side of the building where I am at the moment, on the Henry Street side of the building, is where the entrance was to the radio studios that were up on the third and the fourth floor of the GPO. And the famous and celebrities and all sorts of people would come in on that first door in Henry Street, the Radio Eire entrance, as it remained known for many years. That's after right. Radio Eire had actually moved out of the building. And they would go up then to the third or fourth floor and do their interview or their talk or whatever they were doing at the time. So that, everything happened. Really, everything happened from the GPO. And I in the archive I was talking about, for instance, I have one nice little picture of a quiz program that was happening in the 1940s. It was broadcast from the top floor of the GPO. And there was a panel of experts who knew everything about everything. But if you were somebody who had a tough question for them, you would send in your question and it would be read out on the program, and you might phone in from Dunfanaghy or from Carsavine, and if you could beat the panel and they didn't know the answer to your question, you would hear an old 2 and 6pence in old money being put into a tin. And that would then be turned into a postal order, and it would be sent to you wherever you were around the country, for managing to defeat the experts on your question.
Beat the panel, huh? Beat the chaser.
Exactly. Yeah.
Let's go back to this exhibition. How long does it run for, Stephen?
The exhibition will run from now. It's open every day. Well, not Sunday, but it's open during the weekend on a Saturday from about 10 to 4. And I plan to have it running there until the start of May.
Okay.
So into the new year and springtime, it'll be there. It's free for people to go in, and they can look at a little digital display I have of all the stamps we ever issued, if they want to, or they can zoom around and just look at the exhibits I've put up. So they can spend 10 minutes or they can spend an hour, whatever it suits for people to do.
For anybody who might be listening outside of Ireland, or indeed in Ireland but can't get to Dublin in that time frame, is there anything online that gives us a sense of it?
I have some material online, not directly connected with this exhibition, but for instance, I mentioned the Royal Irish Academy earlier on. They have a section called the Digital Repository of Ireland, and it's a very good way of preserving material in digital format. And if people go onto that site, DRI, they will see most of the stamps that I have that have been issued by An Post over the years. If they search on that site, they can browse through stamps on that. So it's a way of looking at some stamps not directly related to the current exhibition, but if people are interested in the subject, it's a way of looking through these sort of things.
Fantastic. The National Print Museum is where the exhibition is on. Irish stamps dating back as far as 1922, and even before that, as you mentioned to us a little earlier on. Stephen Ferguson, curator of the exhibition, thanks ever so much for talking to us about it. Wish you a very happy new year, and hopefully 2024 will be good for you and for everybody at An Post, and we might see lots more stamps as well.
Thank you very much, Ger.
The way you're glowing in the twilight, it still hits me like the first time. Is it just around midnight? Oh, I don't know, 'cause time flies by when I'm with you. I don't know what to say about your eyelids, and oh, I drift away. I still get nervous after all these years, and the words just disappear. Lately all that I can hear is white noise when you speak. White noise, white noise. Lately I don't hear the sound of you talking to me. It's white noise, white noise. Oh, I promise that I'm listening, but when I see your eyes I wanna dive right in. The way you flood my mind, all I hear is white noise when you speak. White noise. Let's go hiding in the shadows and find somewhere only we know. Ain't it funny how life goes? If you were gone, I'd be so lost. What would I do if none of this is true? 'Cause if you left me, my heart would break into a million pieces, scattered round the room. Can we live like lovers do? Lately all that I can hear is white noise when you speak. White noise, white noise. Lately I don't hear the sound of you talking to me. It's white noise, white noise. Oh, I promise that I'm listening, but when I see your eyes I wanna dive right in. The way you flood my mind, all I hear is white noise when you speak. White noise, and it sounds like white noise when you speak. White noise.
That's what it's called, White Noise. It comes from Gavin James. Brand new from him. When I say brand new, it's a week or so old. And I like it. I thought you might as well. Stephen Ferguson from On Post, thank you very much for talking. That was fascinating. I enjoyed that conversation immensely. Indeed. Let's do a very quick break, and just after that we'll get up to some other bit of development. We're not too far away from the end of the first part of the programme, and we have there'll be ructions in the second part, I can guarantee.
Live on Eire, presented by Ger Sweeney.
I have mentioned Fota Wildlife Park before on the programme. Fota is Fota. It's based in County Cork, and it's celebrating the arrival of the first baby Francois Langer monkey to be born there. The baby was born on the 22nd of November to its mother, May, and his dad, Shinobi. The Francois Langer monkey is classified as endangered by the International Union of Conservation of Nature, the IUCN. Now, Mammy May, who was born in 2016, and her younger sister, Callie, who was born in 2018, made their journey to Fota Wildlife Park from Twycross Zoo in the UK in September of 2022 as part of a European endangered breeding programme. Joining them shortly after was Shinobi, born in 2016, who arrived from ZSL Whipsnade Zoo in UK in December of 2022. Lead ranger at Fota, Teresa Power, said that they hope that the birth of this baby will help raise awareness about the critical need for conservation efforts for the Francois Langer. This is a wild population, or there is, she said, a wild population of between 1,400 and 1,650 in China and fewer than 500 left in Vietnam. The baby Francois Langer monkey was striking orange colouring. Absolutely fabulous. You should have a look at it online. Stands out against the contrasting black fur of the adults in the group. The baby's coat is expected to transition from orange to black over the next few months, which is the natural development of Francois Langer monkeys. Ms. Power said that Fota Wildlife Park is calling on the public to help name the new baby via its website. So you might like to have a look at that yourself. Fota Wildlife Park, Fota. And you can Google that and it'll come up, and you might want to put your suggestion as to what you could call the new baby. And that'd be lovely. There's no point now in I taking another piece of music because there's only just over a minute and a half before I head to news. So what I'll do is I'll tell you what we're doing tomorrow on the programme, on the radio station, shall I? Because when I finish here at 9 o'clock, I'll be closing the shop down, and you will have the BBC World Service taking you through until I open the shop again tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock for daybreak, because Dave is on holidays this week and next week, and hopefully is having a lovely time, nice relaxing family time. And it's nice to be able to get at this time of the year, isn't it? Very much so. So I'll be with you from 8 o'clock until 10. If you can join me, that'd be lovely. Completely different programme to what you're listening to today at the moment, because it's not an Irish programme, but there'll be Irish bits and pieces in there as well. You can be sure of that. Giles will be along then between 10 and 12, live from the studio. We don't have Stephen for Europe today between 12 and 2, so we'll be going back to the BBC from 2 o'clock until 4 then. Selena McKenzie, the best of the lifestyle show from 4 o'clock until 6. Hannah Murray and the best of TRE in the afternoon. From 6 o'clock until 7, we're going to Nerja, and Howard, who was scourged with technical issues this evening. Hate that, don't you? I know, it was a fright. But he'll be with you for Spain today between 6 and 7. And then we have the best of the book show with Hannah between 7 and 9 tomorrow evening. So that's what we have for you. Hopefully you'll be able to join us for some of that, if not all of it. And don't forget, at all times, you can send a WhatsApp to +34 645 99 67 95, or you can send an email to studio@tre.radio. Time for the news, and I'll be back in 2 minutes' time with the second part of the programme. Don't go away, please.
Talk Radio Europe.
Your voice in Spain.
Live on Eire, presented by Ger Sweeney.
And you're welcome back. Nice to have your company on this Wednesday evening, the 27th of December. We have left Christmas behind. Well, we still have the Three Kings to come. I know that, on the 6th of January. And we have New Year's to come as well. Although that's not as big a deal, is it? Or is it just my age? Probably just my age. Anyway, that's all to come before everything settles down yet. Yes, coming up in this hour of the programme, George Lee and Ben Sweeney will be joining me to have a chat about some of the things that are memorable from 2023 and some of the things that we might attempt kind of predicting as we look ahead at 2024. So I'm looking forward to that very much, myself, George and Ben. It's usually the G2, myself and George, the two Gs, Ger and George. But we'll have to call this the Bee Gees because you've got Ben in there with the Gs. So that's coming up very shortly, all right? A huge increase in cocaine use in Ireland and across Europe is being driven by employed middle and upper class people who believe that it is acceptable to use the drug without taking any responsibility for the organised crime associated with it. That's according to the Gardaí. The Garda National Drugs and Organised Crime Bureau says it has seized over €210 million worth of drugs this year, most of it cocaine, including a ton more cocaine than cannabis. Detective Chief Superintendent Seamus Boland says that the increase is not coming from working class or deprived parts of society, but from educated and sophisticated professionals who were generating the money for the drugs cartels. The head of the Bureau also says cocaine can be easily purchased and users no longer travel to particular areas in towns and cities to buy drugs because the dealer will come to them. The Gardaí say this evolution is the way drugs are bought and sold, and it's feeding the cartels and where the money is now coming from. They also say it makes it extremely difficult for them to tackle the problem. The Gardaí say that when they look at the vulnerable addicts and the areas significantly affected by the gangs and cartels where the violence will take place, those socialising on a weekend and buying cocaine cannot walk away from the fact that they're part of the problem and feeding the problem. There have been 2 gangland murders this year. The murder of Tristan Sherry during a gang-related gun attack on Dublin restaurant on Christmas Eve, and the murder of Brandon Ledwidge, who was shot dead outside his home in Finglas last month. The figure has dropped from 5 in 2022 and represents a substantial drop in the last 15 years. In 2010, 30% of all murders were gangland killings. 23 people died in organised crime murders that year. While the reduction in the last few years is welcome, the head of the Drugs and Organised Crime Bureau says that one murder is one too many. Gardaí, he says, are constantly tackling and dismantling the street gangs involved in these murders, particularly the local units in North and West Dublin, where a dangerous drug feud is continuing. However, he says that Ireland is experiencing a low level of gangland murders, which is contrary to our European partners who were experiencing a spike. There has also been a corresponding rise in the number of murders prevented and lives saved. The Garda Drugs and Organised Crime Bureau has intervened in planned assassinations and saved 80 lives since 2016. There were 3 interventions in 2022, but none this year so far. The largest seizure of cocaine this year was on the MV Matthew, which was intercepted by the Defence Forces and boarded at sea by customs officers and Gardaí in September. Gardaí say that the use of the ship is indicative of the evolving methods of drug smuggling used by the South American and other cartels to bring larger quantities to the lucrative markets of Europe. A second such seizure was made when customs officers seized another €21 million worth of cocaine on the Maltese-registered cargo ship, the MV Varela, when it arrived in the port of Foynes in County Limerick. Gardaí have also seized light aircraft this year and say submersibles and drones, similar to those being used in the war in Ukraine, are also being utilised by transnational drug trafficking gangs. Drones have been identified on a small scale to bring drugs into prisons, but Gardaí say that Ireland is not immune to the use by organised crime gangs of sophisticated smuggling methods and modern technology. Gardaí also say that 2023 has been a very significant year for targeting the Kinahan organised crime group, and a substantial file is with the Director of Public Prosecutions. Detective Chief Superintendent Boland says that they have developed a very positive working relationship with the authorities in the United Arab Emirates, where the leadership of the Kinahan organisation crime group is based. He also denied claims that the Gardaí are not focusing on the Hutch organised crime group, insisting that any such perception is incorrect. However, he pointed out that the Kinahan Group is a much bigger transnational crime group and has been responsible for much of the criminal activity since its gang member David Byrne was shot dead at the Regency Hotel in 2016. It's therefore a primary target for the Gardaí. He also said that the National Garda Drugs and Organised Crime Bureau has 15 priority investigations running at any one time, targeting the most violent organised crime groups causing the most harm. Detective Chief Superintendent Boland said that both the Kinahan and Hutch organised crime groups understand fully the power of social media and the importance of putting their opinions out to try to control public opinion. They also use it as a means to threaten other people through social media, which can lead to headlines in national media. Social media is being weaponized and organised crime groups use it, he said. There was a lot in that, I know, but there was a lot in it that I wanted to bring to you. Right? If that kind of makes sense. Yeah. Good. Delighted to hear it. Don't get a chance to play Villagers too often. Don't know why, but here he is. It's a song called Everything I Am Is Yours. We'll be looking back at 2023 and looking ahead to 2024 shortly.
Just a man tipping on a wire, tightrope walking fool, balanced on desire. I cannot control these ever-changing ways, so how can I be sure the feeling will remain? It'll always change, but everything I am is yours. Everything I am is yours. Find it hard to say what's going on inside. Got these little walls, I couldn't break them if I tried, but I promise I'll be true, and I promise I'll be right. Sickness and in health, in the darkness and the light, I give you every side. Everything I am is yours. Everything I am is yours. Left my demons at the door, so what you
Isn't it? It's called Everything I Am Is Yours. It comes from Villagers. As I said, don't get a chance to play Villagers on the programme. Don't know why. I must make a mental note and try and play Villagers because there's plenty of music there to choose from. I like that though. Everything I Am Is Yours. All right, let's do a quick break, and after that, I can't be responsible for that, for what happens. But I suppose if I open the cage and let him out, that's it. It is my fault. We'll be chatting with George Lee and Ben Sweeney about this year and a little bit maybe about next year.
Live on Eire, presented by Ger Sweeney.
It's that time of the year again when Talk Radio Europe's lawyers are very busy because they know that George Lee and Ben Sweeney will be joining me for a look back, our traditional look back at the year that was, and maybe looking ahead a small little bit and try and forecast what might be in store for us in the year ahead. George Lee, you're very welcome. How are you?
I'm not doing too bad at all, Ger, and you?
Good, yeah, good. We got this far. Once we get over the old New Year now, and the Three Kings on the 6th of January, it'll be plain sailing into St. Patrick's Day. It'll be smashing.
Wait, St. Bridget's Day first. No,
well, that's true, of course. Yes.
Things, you know.
Yeah, that's true, St. Bridget's Day. Ben Sweeney, how are you?
Hi, Ger. George, how are we?
Ben, only wonderful.
Brilliant. I'm glad to hear it.
Can I thank you for entering into the spirit of this and putting on your Santa jumper? It's wonderful.
Someone had to.
Of course.
You know, there was too many shirts around.
Christmas is over now, lads. Just kind of facing into the new year. 2023. George, was it a good year or a bad year for you?
Was it a good year or a bad year? I'd like to cure its egg, Ger. Good and bad in places, you know.
Right. To cure its egg. I never heard that one.
You look at these things in the greater scheme of things, and I'm still breathing at the end of it, and that has to be a very positive thing. We've come through it, I suppose, relatively unscathed. It's been a strange year, I suppose, all around for everybody, but look, we're still here. Good year or a bad year, Ben?
Yeah, one of those mediocre years. You know, if it was a TV show now, it would be one of those forgetful seasons that, you know, nothing major happens, but that's good too. It's all plot progression. I think that the biggest thing for me was the kind of full return from COVID. Any of the hangovers from COVID seemed to be gone, and full return to normality there. So that was probably the high point.
And we're still talking about it. So there you go. It hasn't gone altogether. They haven't gone away, you know. The famous expression. Lads, there was a lot happened in the news. We'll try and gather some of that as we go along. The health service is still in rack and ruin. The international protection applicants and the housing crisis, big in the thing. Unfortunately, road deaths up this year. Riots, antisocial behaviour, all in there. But I think I would be correct in saying that the biggest story of the year was the RTE story, when it was announced that Ryan Tubridy was given more money than it had been declared that he was given. Then you had the Oireachtas hearings, you have the new Director General Kevin Backhurst in place, people not paying their licence fees, throwing the whole broadcasting thing up in the air. And I think it's a story that's going to run, and I don't think we've heard the last of the shocks from that story as yet. George, what do you think?
Yeah, it was probably a year when broadcasting came of age to a certain extent as well, Ger, because we have spoken about this regularly on the G2 about the fragmentation of the whole media industry over the last number of years. And I think the realization probably hit RTE this year that, you know, they may be the national broadcaster, but that doesn't mean that they have any major market share or the divine right to a market share anymore. You know, that's been proven in it. And that, you know, people are also beginning to vote with their pockets. Mm-hmm. Because the license fee, as you say, isn't being paid to the level that it needs to be or should be. And I think that's people actually almost in the same way that they worked with water charges many years ago. People are saying, hold on a second here. I can click on to YouTube and get whatever I want to get anymore. And, you know, if I choose to take out a Netflix subscription, at least I know what I'm getting. But do you really want me to pay for public service broadcasting as well? I think, you know, there has been a sea change in people's attitudes. RTE is no longer the big monolith that it was. And Ryan Tubridy, I think, was a bit of a sideshow at the end of the day. I don't think it was as big a story as what it was. But I do think that this was waiting to happen for RTE.
Ben, different generation, you're half the age of myself and George pretty much. Does it impact the people that are under 30 as much as it impacts us, George and I, who are over 50?
No, I think, you know, George had the nail on the head there with the coming of age for RT, and I suppose bringing it from this subscriber model where everyone is sitting in front of the telly anyways, and sure we can just show them anything because, you know, not to be too general about it, but I think really it has been a case to them that, okay, we need to start looking at what is actually wanted by our audience, you know. So not to get too much into the program details of RT, because as George says, there's more to it. But I think the fact that they're dropping some of their digital channels and they're looking at more podcast stuff now, especially for kind of the RT Junior kind of under 18 market, there'll be more put to digital. I think that is probably the biggest thing. So I think, yeah, like Ryan Tubridy will be the poster boy of it all, but I think when it comes down to it, you'll see RT moving into the 21st century properly, or properly the digital age, as George says there, with the license fee, and how many people have stopped paying that, and the work or the hurt that's going to put on RT, and the political grilling they're getting, I think will be kind of the legacy of that. And actually, one of the things I thought about the RT, not scandal, but let's say the
it
story
is a scandal.
About RT,
yeah, it's a scandal.
Yeah. I suppose the RT story, anyways, was it how quickly it went away from maybe RT or Ryan Tubridy and more onto the kind of entertainment factor in Leinster House, and the kind of light it shone on the political kind of interviewing or how the politicians were doing in handling this story, as well as, you know, how RT had been running.
You're going to see personnel changes as well, because the big salaries that people are on at the minute, like $500,000 and 400,000 and 300,000, they're no longer going to be getting that. And when their contracts come up for renewal, you will have the likes of News Talk, you'll have maybe Dublin's 98 FM, you'll have other radio stations across the country saying, well, look, they're only going to be getting €125,000 in RTE. So if we can make it 130, we could bring a big name to us. Is that going to change the landscape as well, George?
I don't know if there's any big names anymore, to be perfectly honest with you. I would have said that Ryan Tubridy is a big name, obviously, but he's gone to Virgin now. And it's going to be interesting to see how he impacts the market, because some of his stuff is going to be syndicated onto local radio stations around the country as well. And that's going to be interesting. But I don't know if there's anybody in RTE currently that would be able to garner a salary much. I mean, Joe Duffy is probably their biggest guy at the moment, you know. Brendan O'Connor, I mean, he's on 2 days a week. Mm-hmm. I would have said if Marion Finucane was alive, you know, possibly she would be one of those. But really, RTE don't have the firepower that they had previously either, you know. You see, as well as that, you have to look at the way in which education has impacted on all of this as well. When we left school, as you know, Ger, there was nowhere where you could get formal broadcast training or third level degree qualification in any of this stuff, which was a major drawback to the likes of you and me who had to learn it on the job. Nowadays, there's a myriad of third level courses in all of this stuff as well, which means that there are people coming out that are extremely well trained and are extremely well versed in all sorts of things, from research through to presentation skills, like your illustrious son there that's sitting in the Christmas jumper in a third level institution by the look of him at the moment as well. So, and that's what I mean, you know, that Gay Byrne was an outlier, you know, because Gay Byrne had a massive talent. Terry Wogan had a massive talent. Eamon Andrews had a massive talent. Pat Kenny had a massive talent. But that's all they had. They didn't have formal training.
That's right. All right. Well, we move on. Riots and antisocial behaviour. And this stems from a riot that happened in Dublin about 6 weeks ago. Now, at this stage, I would imagine it resulted from a tragic stabbing of a number of children and one of the teachers in the school by a man who was not born and bred in Ireland. That gave an excuse for, I think, the far right and for a number of troublemakers to lash out. And there was a very tense and there was a very difficult few hours on O'Connell Street, Parnell Street in Dublin. It was brought under control by the Gardaí, but it certainly has exercised the politicians, it has exercised the Gardaí and members of the public as well. Ben, starting with you, antisocial behaviour and rioting in Ireland. Is this something we're going to see more of? Is this something that you and your peers are talking about, worried about, anxious about, or does it matter?
I think the point you make there about it, you know, me and my peers know, because I think we're living in a different world. If you look at what's been going on in Europe or in America the last few years, it shows that people live in different bubbles. And I think that is kind of what happened here. I think there has been a section of Ireland who have very radical views on the right, ignored for quite some time. In kind of this case of they're only small, you know, the parties
There's
that
only a few.
represent them. Exactly, and the parties that are representing them aren't getting seats. They're not, a majority view. But certainly post-COVID and some of the conspiracy theories that would have brought in, that's bringing more people to this side of things. And certainly social media as well is bringing out these more radical views. And I would be concerned that that's only going to increase. I think that was probably a wake-up alarm to the politicians and to the Gardaí. First of all, to the politicians, as to maybe the number of people who might feel a certain number of opinions on the right, and definitely to the Gardaí as to how well equipped are we to deal with these sort of things should they happen again. There was very alarming footage of Gardaí getting isolated and assaulted in Dublin City, in the main thoroughfare, in one of the main tourist areas of the city. And I think, if you look back to earlier in the year when there was an American tourist very badly assaulted, and then the Justice Minister does her photo call, she walks around with the guards and says, oh, it's perfectly safe. And then there's more violence, and these are all teenagers. But yeah, I would be concerned that it will be a more majority thing, especially going into an election year, as we will certainly have one election here in Ireland, that there'll be people trying to get their name forward now who might have a bit of an audience following COVID, following any of this kind of far right things, and now putting their views out there and trying to get their name out. I would be concerned that there might be a bit more, yeah.
George?
I'm tempted to remember the phrase that was used to me one time by a very wise older man who came out with the line, too far east is west. I struggle to understand what the difference between the far right and the far left is ultimately, because I think they meet in the middle somewhere. This was organised chaos in many ways. I think this was just a bunch of yobs that came out onto the street and saw an opportunity, and that they're there. Look, you see them at football matches. You see them. You see them on Patrick's Day when they get drink into them. This was just a more constant. I really think we're giving this too much oxygen altogether in terms of trying to read political commentary into it. I think it's now being hijacked by a number of people. And, I hear the likes of Paul Murphy and the other guy, holding press conferences during the week. I just wonder, are they trying to find a niche in the far right and the far left that may or may not even exist?
Do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to jump into sport because it's all. I know there's other things that we can discuss in this. It was a particularly good year, 2023, for Irish women and for women in sport. You've got the Katie Taylors there, you've got Leona Maguire in golf, you've got the huge development in the world of camogie, and of course the Women's World Cup campaign was just phenomenal. Again, we'll stay with you, George. It was a good year for the ladies in terms of sport, wasn't it?
It was, and I think you've probably missed out on the biggest one of all, which I think has a great opportunity for us in the Olympics, of course, coming in 2024, and that's Rashida Adeleke, who has had an incredible year.
I just couldn't pronounce it. It wasn't that I didn't remember her.
Yeah, you just forgot to put in your false teeth again.
That's it.
But a fantastic lady. And again, if we can go back to what we said previously, or where we were, part of the new Ireland, a lady of colour, who when she opens her mouth speaks like somebody from Tala, which is absolutely brilliant. It doesn't have a name like Ryan or Kelly or whatever it is. And I think it's just a fantastic ambassador for our country internationally, as well as everything else, and it sticks a finger in the eye of people who are in the anti-migrant camp a little bit as well. So look, I think it brings in all of that. But let's get back to sport. Yeah, look, tremendous year. And of course, Daniel Wiffinger, who absolutely blitzed the pool in the European Championships. It was tremendous to see that. So I think, to coin the phrase in the song, I think the future is so bright we have to wear shades in terms of sport in Ireland.
Good year for the ladies in sport, Ben.
It certainly was, and I suppose particularly when you compare them to the male success, but I think that makes it better because they're still struggling with attendance numbers at matches, and I suppose stereotypes about quality, which you'd see if you look at any clips online. You mentioned camogie support there, and I think that's the increase there has been seen across the board. Irish Gaelic Games would have had this 2020 campaign in 2018, 2019, that by 2020 they wanted to see a 20% increase in coverage and a 20% increase in attendance. And I think they've hit that, and they've gone actually probably far beyond it. It's great to see, in particular, when we talk about the Women's World Cup, Katie McCabe, who's one of the main women for Arsenal, and to see a number of Irish players who were at the highest level of the equivalent for the women's soccer in the UK, and to see us doing so well internationally. Again, that international success is replicated with Katie Taylor and Leona Maguire and the Olympics there, as you talk about. So, no, I think it's been very promising, and I think the funding that needs to go towards them now, and you're still seeing these protests in Gaelic games, the likes of clashes of fixtures or pay and everything, I think needs to be looked at more generally across women's sport.
You touched on the fact that the women seem to be doing much better than the men at the moment, and I suppose one of the outstanding performances by men was the Irish Rugby World Cup team. George, you were glued to that. A fabulous effort, and they're getting closer.
They are getting closer, Ger. Look, I know they've bowed out at the same level now on 4 or 5 different World Cups. And if you look at it, I suppose on the face of it, you would say that they haven't made any improvement. But I think definitely in terms of the world stage, we went into this World Cup as number 1. I think we're still actually number 2 or number 3. The Leinster juggernaut seems to be taking off again. The Munster one is a bit sluggish, I think. Connacht, are holding their own, even though they had a big beating a couple of weeks ago. Look, I think the structure of Irish rugby is very good. It's far superior to the structure of Irish soccer, for instance. And I think, we are going forward. Now, the other problem with that, and it's a bit like, Clare, when they won the All-Ireland in, was it 95, and Limerick over the last couple of years, there is a golden generation comes along every so often. And I think we might have seen that golden generation in terms of the rugby as well, which came at a time as well when they were incredibly well schooled and all of that. So, maybe our expectations are a little bit high for them coming into the Six Nations. But I think, look, rugby is in a very good spot.
You mentioned the Limerick hurling. I suppose we have to give credit where credit is due. 4th All-Ireland in a row. Obviously, the people of Limerick are still smiling.
Yeah, I'd actually just love to hear Ben giving credit where credit is due there, if you don't mind. Yeah.
Ben?
Well, you mentioned my Christmas jumper earlier, George. I don't know if you can see the logo on it. It's an O'Neill's Clare Christmas jumper. I said I'd wear for the occasion, even though
you
Christmas
kept that
is
very
over
low,
now.
Ben, under the camera there for a long
I did.
time. Yeah,
but look, Limerick, what can you say that hasn't been said already? There was a couple of weeks into the championship where people are going, they had a close win over Waterford there, and they nearly lost this, and maybe this is the year where they're within reach. And sure, by the time it mattered, the business end, it was they were well and truly gone. Look, they're a professional outfit. It's an amateur sport, but by God, the leadership team, Paul Connacht and John Kiley there, they really have a Clare man, Paul Connacht, the genius behind the Limerick hurling team.
And of course there's a couple of other people with Clare connections on it.
That's it, yeah, including a couple of the players, if we want to be into the politics side of things. But look, you can't fault what they've done. They've been outstanding. The leadership from Declan Hannon and the management team, they have been excellent. But I think hurling is in a good place in Munster. I don't know about the national side of things, but certainly in provincial hurling it's very good. But a fabulous year for
and the perceived wisdom generally is that if Limerick are to do the 5 in a row, their biggest challenge won't be in the All-Ireland semi-final or All-Ireland final. It'll probably be getting out of Munster next year. I think that's a real credit to what's happening in Munster. And of course, our main sponsor then has to go and put £1 million into every other county in the country as well as Limerick at this stage, hoping that he might be able to turn up somebody that might be able to turn Limerick over next year.
You're referring to the fact that JP McManus has given every county board in the country €1 million, and as you say, he's helping the opposition. But it'll mean a lot more to smaller counties than it will to bigger counties. It will do a lot more. They'll get a bigger bang for their buck in terms of that. But still, it was very generous. I think a wonderful thing for JP McManus to do.
Yeah, I think so. And where that's really going to be felt is on the ground. If I'm correct, every county has split it up perfectly between the clubs. So the smaller a county you are, the more there'll be per club. I think Clare has the bones of 13 or 15,000 euro per club, if I'm doing my maths right there. But it was an outstanding gesture. Just the cynic in me is just saying that he's doing it just so people can say, well, he's funding Limerick, and you're going, well, he's funding everybody actually. But it was a great gesture, and I think just on the ground with clubs, it'll really benefit there. And
George.
It was superb, and I mean what the man has done for sport, and you know the level of vitriol that was poured out on top of him.
Ridiculous.
It was on a ridiculous level, I suppose. But look, you're going to get that in sport anyway. I've seen it particularly in soccer, as you know, over the years. The man is a legend in Limerick, and nothing will ever shift that. I suppose he has done incredible work in all the charitable sides of things, and he's on a personal level. He's very approachable as well. And, you know, people say he did this for the PR reasons and that. He's done an awful lot of work behind the scenes in an awful lot of places without any PR machine behind him. And I think that needs to be recognised a little bit as well.
Let's move on to politics. And I don't want to dwell too much on this because this is something we get enough of on a daily basis. But I mean, the government is exactly as it was this time last year. There hasn't been a huge drop or increase in support for either of the three parties involved there. Interestingly, a notable drop recently in support for Sinn Féin, according to the polls, which we'll come back to. Northern Ireland, the Assembly is still not sitting. So there hasn't been a whole lot of movement in terms of politics in the country. But I think the next 12 months is going to certainly open people's eyes because we have the local elections, we have the European elections, and there is also a thought that because Sinn Féin, which is the largest opposition party in the country, because they have seemed to drop a little bit, that there could be a snap election in 2024. What would you think, George?
Yeah, I think you've hit all the points there. Personally, I think Sinn Féin has peaked too early to a certain extent. They've been caught out on a number of things. They stepped on a few landmines in the last couple of months, particularly with this no confidence motion or confidence motion as it was in the Minister
Helen McEntee after the riots,
I think that was very poorly considered. It actually showed a side of Fine Gael, which I hadn't seen since they went into power the last time around, where people actually, showed us that they could play the political game if they really wanted to, and came out swinging. And I think they did put, to use a Katie Taylor analogy, they did put Sinn Féin on the ropes for a period of time. And I think that was reflected in the polls, which were probably timely. It'll be interesting to see a poll of polls, which will probably come at the end of the year, and see where they are then. There is a sense, I do think, though, of lethargy within the electorate around the current government. I was listening to something the other day where they mentioned that the Taoiseach, and I really had to think very, very hard to see which one of them is Taoiseach and which of them is Taoiseach at this stage. And that is going to be a major problem when they go to the polls, because the brand recognition of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael has disappeared completely at this point. But interestingly, if you look at the polls, what's most likely to get a government formed the next time, based on the current figures, is more of the same, or maybe a change in the Greens to the Independents or to Labour or Socialist Octams or whatever. But by and large, the Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael thing seems to be holding.
It does. Ben? From a young person's perspective or a younger person's perspective?
Yeah, look, I think we've seen Sinn Féin poll really strongly with the kind of under 35s for the last couple of years. But like George said there, they almost peaked too early. As we've discussed many times, their election success in 2020 was a huge surprise to everybody, not least themselves, or they'd have run more candidates. And I think they've been beating the same drum because the same problems exist. And I just think they're not exactly sure what to do at the moment. As George said, they made some mistakes there. Of course, Mary Lou McDonald was having some health issues earlier this year. As far as I know, that's all resolved. But there was talk over, well, if she can't come back, who's going to lead them? Pierce Doherty, maybe. But in terms of speakers they have who can really hit that home and hit the government, they don't have that many. So I think really once they can keep those couple of personnel, that's what they need. Also important will be the local elections in June. I don't think Sinn Féin are going to do as strongly as maybe they're tipped to be, certainly at a general, because I think when it comes to local elections, it's more on the person. Certainly they didn't in the couple of months before the 2020 election. So I wonder how that's going to go, and maybe if they don't perform as strongly, how that will impact their general election performance, because I'm sure I would put a lot of money on there being an election in August or September next year. maybe September, October, I think there'll be a budget and then a snap election. I don't think we'll see next winter with this government. So really, I think, the first 6 months of next year, if Sinn Féin can keep that messaging going, it depends how the government deals with some of the issues coming. We're in the harsh winter now. Will there be any major problems coming out of the health crisis? Of course, the last election we saw was February or maybe early March.
February 2020, yeah.
Yeah, and that was caused because of a no confidence motion in the Minister for Health. So, you just don't know what will come about. But I think the first 6 months will be telling there in what happens next year.
George, did you want to come back in there on something Ben was saying?
Yeah, well, it was actually a corollary of it, really. I think for the first time ever that foreign policy is actually playing a major part in the problems that Sinn Féin are experiencing as well, because their stance on the whole Israeli-Gaza thing, I think, has been a little bit disjointed. They want to be supporting the old PLO vote and the Palestinian side of things, but I think they're taking soundings from the ground, and those soundings are very confused, so they really don't know which way to go. That is going to cheese off a little bit of their own core support as well. The way that this is playing out is for the first time ever that a political party in Ireland may be actually becoming unstuck a little bit by foreign policy, which is amazing, really. Let's
stay with that theme then, because let's look at I suppose there are two major issues across the world, or there were in 2023. They will remain with us for 2024. One of those is war. You have the ongoing war in Ukraine. And you have, since the 7th of October, you have the Israel-Gaza conflict. The second item on that agenda would be climate change. So they are, I think, the two big issues. Ben, I'd be very interested. I know that people of your age and younger would be probably a little bit more exercised and a little bit more clued into the whole climate change than people, let's say, of George and my generation. But what's the thought on the war scenario, the wars, I should say, Ukraine and the Israel-Gaza conflict? Sorry, when I say what, I don't want to break down as to, who people think is right or wrong, but are you talking about it?
I think we're really talking about Israel-Palestine. I don't think there's anyone of my generation is giving a whole lot of consideration to Ukraine the last couple of weeks. And I suppose that's because it's newer, and what we're seeing are maybe more graphic representations of the war going on, maybe footage we wouldn't have seen. That's really taken a hold with people maybe under 35. I suppose, I work in third level, and the Palestine thing has always been a big thing for students. But really, I think one of the things we've noticed in the news cycle anyways, whatever about generationally, is Ukraine moving to the side. I suppose, if you look at what's actually going on in that war, it's kind of a stalemate. It looks like both sides are fairly trenched in for the winter. So I think for the next few weeks and months, as long as it continues to go on, Israel and Gaza will be the biggest story, probably in the news, but certainly in my circles, I'd imagine, yeah.
George?
You see, Jerry, you never really know what's going on behind the scenes in any of these things. You know, listening to with the, I suppose, increasing frustration to the United Nations, trying to get a motion over the line, calling for a ceasefire. And on the face of it, you'd say that should just happen. But I am tempted to believe that the reason that the States keeps asking for derogations on it and postponements on the vote and all of that sort of thing is that something is going on in the background, and that they don't want to be forced into a corner where they have to come down on one side or the other, because it's a delicate negotiation. So that's the hope that I have. Perhaps that's the way it is. Strangely, I also would feel that by this time next year, we will be looking at a completely different scenario in the Ukraine. I think this war has to come to an end sometime. I think it will come to an end in 2024. I think public opinion within Russia, particularly since Putin has announced that he's running again, I think that's going to start playing into it. Zelensky seems to be losing a lot of his luster internationally, and you can see the number of foreign trips that he's taken in the last while. Americans are getting sick and tired of everything. They're coming into an election election year themselves next year. So this is going to drop way down the agenda, and everything that happens from a funding point of view for any of these wars or for any of this stuff is going to become very much secondary and tertiary in the next 12 months. So look, I think there's an awful lot to play for here. Also on a very human level, it's interesting how these wars are playing out, because I won't say for the first time, but certainly in a modern era, a lot of the wars are played out from a public relations point of view. And you saw what Israel did. They shut down the internet in Gaza for periods of time when they wanted to get their own messages out there. It's just incredible that this war has been fought very much on Twitter, TikTok, and everywhere else a little bit as well. So look, there's an awful lot to play for. If I were to predict it, I would say that this time next year we'll be looking at a different world completely than the one we're looking at now.
Let's hope it's a nicer one. Let's stay with politics and let's stay with 2024, because probably one of the biggest things that's definitely going to happen is the election, the presidential election in the United States. It's always something that people take great care to inform themselves on. But it really is shaping up to be something that is going to be very positive or very negative for the world, and nobody knows yet. We assume we know who the players are going to be, but there's even no guarantee of that. How important, George, the elections in the United States next year?
Probably never been more critical, Ger, the way these elections go. I would say that Trump, if you were to have the election this minute, Trump is home and hosed and in. But there's an awful lot of court dates between now and the time he winds up in November next year, having his name on a ballot. I was watching with interest over the last couple of days. Poor Rudy Giuliani has had to file for bankruptcy on the basis of the $148 million that he owes to the two ladies, and I'm sure he's cursing the day that he ever met Donald Trump. Yeah, there's a number of the states within America at this stage are looking at trying to get him taken off the ballot entirely because of where he's at. So I think there's a long way to run in the Trump story. I think there's a long way to run in the Biden story as well, because I honestly don't think that Joe Biden's name is going to be on that ballot paper next November.
It's hard right now to see that it won't be, but it's also equally difficult to see why it could possibly be.
I think if it were any other election cycle, I think the Democrats would certainly be looking to put another person in there.
And Kamala Harris isn't strong enough. Sure, she's not.
She's not strong enough either. But there are a number of other Democrats out there, who do seem to be strong enough. There seems to be more talent within the Democratic Party at the moment than there does in terms of the
Republicans.
The Republicans at this stage, and that's only me looking at it, albeit from 3,000 miles away. I just think this is going to be intriguing, but I do think that America is at a crossroads, and the far right thing in America has been growing and growing and growing. We don't hear mention of the Tea Party anymore, but I do think that the Trump era was certainly given birth to during the Tea Party, and that this has begun to move up a little bit, and it's been ratcheted up all the time. So look, this is going to be very interesting. Are we really going to have a president, in the White House that incited people, or has been alleged to have incited people in January 6th? It's going to be very interesting.
Ben?
What I think is interesting is I'm looking at a book about JFK here beside me, and his nephew, RFK Jr., is polling very strongly under 35s and for independence. And I think, it says a lot that, America has never really been a third party system. It's always the two, and the fact that people are looking for alternatives. There isn't an obvious person. There's no centre ground. You've either got Joe, who's very passive, we'll say, or Trump, who's really on the far right. So I think it'll be interesting to see. I don't know where the Democrats would go if Joe Biden wasn't to run. I don't think Kamala Harris would win it either. But equally, I don't know what the Republicans will do, because even when you see with Colorado and they're not letting him, or the court in Colorado saying that he's not eligible to run there, and then they're going, right, okay, but all of the alternative Republicans who are still doing their polling are coming out to bat for him. It's a broken system, but it's kind of worrying to say. I'm looking forward to watching it as entertainment value, but I think that's that's all it is at the moment.
All right, it's a case of wait and see. We lost a number of people, folks, in 2023. We lose people every year. Doesn't make it any easier. Is it my imagination, or did we lose a particularly high number of people in the entertainment business, George?
I suppose we did from an Irish point of view.
That's what I mean. Sorry, yes, this is all the Irish side of it, yeah.
From an Irish perspective, we did. I mean, Christy Dignam, Shane McGowan, Sinead O'Connor, life caught up with them. Illness respects nobody. They're just immense talents, and we're just very, very lucky because, as you know, one of the things that I love to do is look back at history and also collect memorabilia. And I'm looking here in my own office as I'm talking to you at an old wind-up gramophone here, and I've John McCormack records underneath it. And that was the first recording, and that's only 100 years ago, the first recordings that were done. So there's been hundreds of years of very, very talented people that have come and gone that we have no record of. We're just fortunate that we're now left with this incredible record and discography of these people, which really, I suppose, will stand the test of time.
And we mentioned that it was Irish people, but there's two men in there that were born in Ireland but were associated more with Britain, and one of those was Paul O'Grady. He died in March of this year, and Michael Gambon, the Irish actor, Irish-born actor, I should say, both were great characters. And Ben, you as a young lad, you would have been reading Harry Potter, so your first experience of Michael Gambon would be when you went to the movies and saw him replace Dickie Harris as
Dumbledore.
Yes. Dumbledore is dead, I think, was one of the headlines on one of the papers when Michael died.
Of the Irish entertainment figures there who died this year, he was probably the one that I would have been most moved by. But, you know, looking back at the names of people who have died and the last few days, I was speaking to a number of people who are organising kind of an event to celebrate the Irish diaspora in England and abroad. It really strikes you as to kind of Ireland punching above its weight in entertainment terms. And if you look at the Golden Globes nominations, which were out just before Christmas, and, you know, there's 7 nominations for one film studio. You've Colin Farrell, Brendan Gleeson, Barry Keoghan, Paul Mescal's up there, Saoirse Ronan. You know, you've got these names in entertainment who are really representing Ireland, and not in the diddly eye sort of way, but in their own sort of nuance and niche, and well respected that way. So that's the way I'd look. You know, there's a list, a considerable list of Irish people who have died. But look, we're nearly a month on from Shane McGowan's death and the celebration around his life that has been since, and it has been a celebration. I think that's the way I'm looking at it. You know, I don't have much to say by, you know, the legacy these people have left, apart from the fact that they have left a legacy and the good representation it has done for Ireland. Isn't it great that we had them to celebrate?
Listen, that's about it. Done and dusted. We haven't set the world on fire, and we haven't managed to quench any of the fires. But you know,
and I just thank you, Ger, for supplying the mince pies and the cream. They were absolutely delicious.
You got mince pies?
Oh yeah. He sent them in, Ben, by courier.
By courier, yeah. Well, I sent them.
Must have been held up.
No, you know, Ben, I sent them to the house to you, and it turns out you're still in the office. So that's
it. Yeah.
That's what it is, really. Right. So, George Lee, thank you very much indeed for all of the G2s throughout the year and the other bits and pieces that we did. I want to wish you and your family all that's good in 2024, and hopefully we'll be having chips very shortly. And Ben Sweeney, thank you very much indeed. You and Emma and the dogs. Happy New Year and all good in 2024. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thanks, sure. And George, I hope you get at least another one before he replaces us with AI.
I'm going now. Goodbye.
Somewhere in between you and the television screen, I got down on my shaking knees and serenaded television screen. I guess I should have known it was always gonna be sex bomb. And just like that, the karaoke's over. Let's go, mama, stand up so far. I wish that I could call you when I'm sober. And just like that, the karaoke's over. Let's go, mama, stand up so far. I wish that I could call you when I'm sober. And just like that, the karaoke's over. Let's go, mama, stand up so far. I wish that I could call you when I'm sober. And just like that, the karaoke's over. Let's go, mama, stand up so far. I wish that I could call you when I'm sober.
Isn't that nice? Lovely, isn't it? Aye. It comes from Saint Sister. I've played it before on the programme. It's called Karaoke Song, Saint Sister. Gemma and Morgana, right? And they're based in Northern Ireland. They've been making music together for the past 5 years. And Gemma is the arranger and producer, and Morgana is the songwriter. And they make a lovely sound. Yes, I'm going to play more from them, hopefully, in 2024. We're nearly done and dusted. Thanks very much to the boys, to George and to Ben, for taking a look back at 2023 and a little sneaky peek at 2024. And when George made reference to the fact that this time next year it'll be a very different world, I said to him that I hoped it would be a nicer place and a better place for us all. And that would be my wish for everybody. I was trying to decide what will I play out with, what song will I finish up with, and I was thinking, what's made an impact on me in 2023? The year that I had, there's quite a few things made an impact on me, but then I had to think about the positive things. And one of the singers, I think, that really managed to capture the imagination of people, and he filled stadia, and his music was being played across the world throughout the year, was Dermot Kennedy. So I thought, why don't we finish musically with a track from Dermot Kennedy? And here's a song that's called Kiss Me.
Eternalize this moment for the days when I don't believe, when our love gets stolen, 'cause there's no exception, and I know time will take you far from me. Let this night invade my lungs, you're all I want to breathe. Right beside the lake, I burn for you, you burn for me. So kiss me the way that you would if we died tonight. Hold me the way that you would for the final time. Whatever may come somewhere deep inside, there's always this version of you and I. So just kiss me the way that you would if we died tonight, if we died tonight. The deepest secrets, all the darkest moments, oh, I promise they'll be safe with me. We've all been broken, there's no exception, but you carry it so gracefully. Let this night invade my lungs, you're all I want to breathe. Right beside the lake, I burn for you, you burn for me. So kiss me the way that you would if we died tonight. Hold me the way that you would for the final time. Yeah. Whatever may come somewhere deep inside, there's always this version of you and I. So just kiss me the way that you would if we died tonight. in my lungs. You're all that I wanna breathe. Right beside you down at the lake, I burn for you, burn for me. So kiss me the way that you would if we died tonight, and hold me the way that you would for the final time. Whatever may come somewhere deep inside, there's always
As I said, a man that appears to have professionally a very good year, Dermot Kennedy, and a song called Kiss Me that was played across the world in many radio stations. That is my lot for today. It's my lot for this year as well, as far as Live on Eire is concerned. I will be back tomorrow morning between 8 and 10 for Daybreak, sitting in for Dave, who is on holidays for this week and next week. So happy to be sitting in for him. Thank you to Stephen Ferguson from On Post for joining me this evening to talk to me about the stamps exhibition at the National Print Museum. And thank you to George and Ben for their review of 2023, and indeed for all that they do throughout the year for the programme. Thank you to our Spanish-Irish cultural advisor, Antonio Sierra. And Antonio, Happy New Year to you and to your family, to Patricia Traynor and everybody that's been of assistance on the programme. Thank you. Happy New Year, especially to you. And I look forward to your company in 2024. Bye-bye now and thanks.
Ger Sweeney presents Live on Eire in association with emeraldconnection.net.
You've been listening to a TRE production. If you've enjoyed this programme, there'll be another episode waiting for you next week, right here on this platform, where you can also access our extensive back catalogue of shows and interviews. For more information on our live programming, social media channels and apps, and how to contact Talk Radio Europe, please visit tre.radio.